Here we go.
G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting Wednesday night for a bit of the old rip it off the card. And I tell you what, while the intro was playing, messages were already coming through from Mr. Ange. He jumped the gun. So how about that for being enthusiastic? He couldn't even get the streaming countdown to finish before he stuck his nose in. So good, well done, Mr. Ange. Good stuff to him. How you going there, dude? How's things with you?
I'm going well. How are you, mate?
Oh, I tell you what, what's the deal with tonight? Wednesday night, we're fighting against Kenobi. We're fighting against the State of Origin rugby. We're fighting against the front bar. And you might as well tell me there's another final for MasterChef on. They seem to be on every second week. Now, it's like, is anybody going to be there watching us? That's what I want to know.
Well, I think our ratings show that we've got a faithful band of viewers that watch us live, and those 7 are here every week.
A faithful band of viewers. They're the ones who've like nothing else to do. It's like they're hanging out with us because like, oh yeah, the world's pretty tragic. It's like, oh, I'd like to say, fans, improve your image, be seen with us, but the actual fact is the other way around. So unbelievable. Having said all that, we've got Mr. Greg King joining us, and Mr. Phil slipped his way in there, which is fantastic. Mr. Moneybag Sullivan's. I don't know why he's not watching Kenobi tonight. Good old Glennis from YouTube and Colin and all the rest of it. So, and Joe said, not me. I don't know what the not me part is, but there you go. Everyone got themselves a bit of dicko. It is all good fun. Now, it's obviously, I'm glad you guys are joining us because it's freezing cold. I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable out there. Cold enough to freeze the nuts off a tractor. And so stay inside, stay warm, and hang out with us for the next couple of hours because we've got some really, really groovy stuff to talk about, especially in the Greg King's Cheaper Things segment. There's actually an extension as to what happened last week. Oh, my God, when Ronnie decided to speak to us. Mr. Aaron, what do you reckon, old son?
Yeah, it's a good show tonight. We've got a really good mix of different things, haven't we?
We have indeed. I like this one from Thomas. Hope you're all awesome. Yes, it's always good to be awesome as part of the team. And yes, we are go. Yes, Gerry Anderson is making an appearance this evening, which is particularly groovy. Look at this. He dropped Tony Robinson like a hot potato. Who the hell's Tony Robinson?
Bordrick. Is it Bordrick? Bordrick from Blackadder?
Oh, okay. Is he on tonight? Is he? The only Robinson I know is Mrs. Robinson from The Graduate. So there you go. All right, we have got a whopping big show tonight. We've got a lot to cover off. I decided to change a couple of slides. So we're going for pretty pictures for this one. So there you go. After like nearly 60 episodes, we finally decided to jazz up the show a little bit. But now it's time for a little bit of this. Mr. Aaron, what are we talking about tonight, old son?
First, I have to say I'm shocked that you have added new Doctor Who content to the show, which is not something I saw happening.
No, I didn't add Doctor Who content. I added Docky Who content.
Well, that's going to throw everyone because there's no Doctor Who content. Sorry, no Docky Who content tonight. Well, not much of it anyway. Maybe a little bit. But we're looking at toys at the moment, and there are some new release toys again for conventions in America. Now, we had a look at some last week, and because it's convention and I guess you've got the different cons and the different toy fairs, we're getting a few new announcements. There's a few interesting ones this week that I did not see coming out.
Very good stuff. So, yes, you're talking about the old NECA convention exclusives. Oh, how exciting is this?
Now, last week we looked at the female gremlin, but they've announced more stuff this week. I think, are we looking at the Dungeons and Dragons figures first?
Yes, the old dull and dreary, as somebody I once knew decided to call it. Yep.
Now, this is a really obscure line for a lot of people in the 80s, where Dungeons and Dragons was big. And of course, when anything gets big, toy companies decide to make toys of it. Dungeons and Dragons was one of those toy lines. It was limited, released in Australia, but it was never huge. And where a lot of toys you'd get from toy shops, I remember seeing the Dungeons and Dragons figures in mind games and places like that. So they weren't a raging success, but nevertheless, they're nice figures, and they, of course, have got a cult following. Now they're back. They've released the Lost Wave of Dungeons and Dragons figures. Now, they say it's the Lost Wave, but I'm pretty sure some of those figures were released the first time around. Some of them weren't, though. And I did think it's really interesting that we've discussed this before, how Big W's and Kmart's toy aisles are looking more and more like a 80s time tunnel when you go down there. And now we've got Dungeons and Dragons figures back with the original packaging. It's something about that era, isn't it? I guess people who grew up with it, they're really tapping into that nostalgia at the moment.
Well, yeah, exactly right. I do wonder if those figures look anything like the characters from the movie Dungeons and Dragons. Thomas has said, "Leave the D&D alone." Actually, it wasn't me who called it dull and dreary. It was actually another gamer. He said, "Dull and dreary and advanced dull and dreary." So make of that what you will. I'm just the messenger. I'm just repeating what was said to me all those decades ago. Yes. So, but yeah, if that's the kind of thing that works for you, I mean, you got it. The thing is, though, you go into the store and you got like all these D&D figures. And you go, well, which one do I buy? And the only way you can decide, of course, is to roll a D16 or whatever, a D18. Which one do I buy? Do I buy the male figure or the female figure? And roll. Oh, yeah. I've got a 17. I've got to get the female figure. Do I go for this character or this character?
You know what happens if you roll a 20? You've got to grab the figure and run out without paying.
I like the sound of that. Very, very cool. All right, so the Dungeons and Dragons figures, they came, they went, yay team, very, very good. But the one, I thought, this is pretty groovy, I've got to say. I mean, the world doesn't need another one of these, but the fact that they've done it in the first place is particularly cool for people like myself. Of course, it's the old Thing has made a reappearance.
I know, 60 episodes and you don't like a single toy, and then this one grabs your attention. But this is one I didn't see coming because it's actually, as you would be aware, the Thing image from the poster where you have the light coming from the person's head and all the lights coming out, and that is actually the figure they've made. You can see it's there. It's got those sort of light beams coming out from the figure's face. It is a figure I never ever thought I'd see made, but it is a pretty cool figure, isn't it?
Yeah, I do like it. It's from the movie poster. And of course, the funny thing about the movie poster, when you see the image like this, you don't actually know what it is it's meant to be. It's because obviously the idea of the Thing is you don't physically get to see its actual form. It's always taking something over. Yeah. But the idea of doing an action figure like this is particularly groovy. So the version where it is that version, I mean, you wouldn't really use that because that's not how it appears. It definitely appears like this. But yeah, that's particularly cool, I've got to say. I kind of push my buttons.
Well, I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that the Thing poster was actually painted in a day, and also it's meant to represent that you don't know whose identity anyone is, and that's why there's just the lights coming out of the face. So there's
and that's always been the thing with the actual movie itself. Nobody knew who's who in the zoo, who had what, and whatever else. It was particularly cool. Mr. Fuller said, yes, indeed, the yay Thing, indeed. It's very funny because for those who can remember, well, those who can remember, 1982 is like, Jesus, 40 years ago, for crying out loud. I think, oh yeah, the Thing is 40 years old this year. When it first came out, it got shit canned big time at the cinemas because E.T. had come out and everybody loved E.T. Cute, cuddly aliens versus the ones that rip you apart and take over your insides and whatever. 4 decades later, no one gives a rat's ass about E.T., but the Thing is sort of still as popular as ever, which is awesome as far as I'm concerned. So
I think that the Thing was such a unique movie. Critics saw it and just didn't know how to review it. It was just an explosion of gory special effects, the whole thing all the way through.
Well, you can imagine a reviewer saying, I've just watched E.T., I've cried my eyes out because I phoned home, and they go watch the Thing and the dog's head splits open like a banana, and it's like, oh, freaking, I'm losing my load over this. And just as Phil said, yes, it's definitely not the Thing from Fantastic Four. Definitely not that at all. But Dale says, oh, good to see Dale joining us tonight. E.T. still love him. Absolutely. E.T. is still a popular thing. That's bad English, isn't it? He's still a popular character, but the Thing has a big fan following now, as opposed to E.T. I mean, in fact, there used to be a convention every year called Thing Fest in Canada, I think it was, and they would watch the movie. I had a 35mm print of it. Every year they would watch this thing in Thing Fest, which I thought was particularly cool. Anyway, deviating on a completely wrong track, we've got more exciting stuff here with a bit of Black Adam. Can you actually call that a character Black anymore? Is that like politically correct any longer?
I think you can. I haven't really seen anyone, as long as it's not directed at racism or something like that. I think it's okay. DC are doing it, so these are the first images. There's only 2 of them that McFarlane have released of the Black Adam figure, which is, of course, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, is playing Black Adam. Now, I don't really know the character that well. It is an interesting thing where you came out with Shazam and they're releasing Black Adam, which is apparently one of Shazam's enemies next. The only thing I can say, it is a cool looking figure and they've captured the likeness of The Rock really well. But apart from that, I don't really know Black Adam.
Yeah, no, means nothing to me. I just realised what was written here. This is a comment from the Vile. He's referring to your store, Aaron. He's coming into the shop, as in your shop, with a D20-sided dice. Then he can say the owner endorsed it when he rolls a 20. Yeah, very, very cool. I like that one.
Well, then he'll get a critical hit.
Yeah, well, exactly right. I do remember some people saying about gamers. I was like, mate, what's the deal with the dice? I don't know if people knew this, but it apparently was a thing where gamers would get their dice and they always ensured they were on the shelf with the same numbers pointing upwards, because the idea being that gravity would make the weight fall to the bottom and therefore they'd roll more sixes than ones. I was like, oh, well, whatever.
No, that's the kind of material that gives us gamers a bad name, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. Oh, that's all very, very cool. Anyway, so that was it for the what was it? The exclusives, the Neko.
It was a thin on the ground news week this week. They were the more interesting things that were announced.
Oh, that's okay. Thin on the ground for news is okay, because that actually gives us an opportunity to go to something extremely high end, ultra high quality. Everybody has to rush out and buy one of these. Of course, it has to be in this section.
Useless Pop of the Week!
Oh, dude, what have we got this week?
Well, if we're going to show the pop before we reveal who it actually is, when you saw this, would you have known who this figure was?
Not in a million years. And when I read the description, I had to use the magnifying glass of truth because it was in small text. I thought, what is the idea of that? So for those out there who think, oh, I've got to rush out and buy one of those now, before, when you see the picture, without reading the text, see if you can figure out what it is. All right.
Yeah. So when I saw it, I thought maybe it's one of the Eternals from the Marvel Eternals movie or something like that, or maybe, I don't know. I was really not sure, but it is Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a wonder they're making this, actually. So there you go.
Yeah, it's not a wonderful Wonder Woman. It's an underwhelming Wonder Woman. It's one of those things where they've obviously taken a variant. And of course, if you're a Wonder Woman fan, you probably do know all the different variants and the different costumes that she comes in. And they've made a pop of it. But it is one of those things where I have a criticism with pops. If she was in the, the Stars and Stripes and has the gold lasso, instantly you know who it is. But pops are so generic looking. When you take away the character's iconic look and the different things that they're known for, basically you have no idea. I would not have guessed that was Wonder Woman in a million years. I could be showing my ignorance there, but that is not a Wonder Woman I would want in my collection.
Yeah, I like that one. Wunderfrau. For those who can't read the small text, I do have to bring out the magnifying glass of truth. It does say Ultra something or other secret agent. It's like, yeah, whatever. They've taken another figure and they've just repackaged it in this. So that's ridiculous. I mean, yeah, even Wonder Woman fans wouldn't go for this one, because if they bought this and showed it to their friends, just the figure by itself, they'd be going, "What the hell's that? It could be anything." So yeah, I agree. That's complete. That's a rort. That's what that is.
Yeah. So that is a funny one to come up, and it is funny when Funko bring these out and they trumpet this as the amazing new version of Wonder Woman, where you just bring out the old one that everybody loves.
You know why they can't do that? Because they've already sold them all. They go, okay, can we do a variant where she's got slightly like a different hairstyle or pigtails or something, but just to do a completely white one and go, yeah, this will sell. Collectors will buy this. I mean, that is just ripping people off now. So yeah,
we know from Funko that they could bring her out in a box 5 times as big with Wonder Woman in, and say Wonder Woman and her invisible jet, and pack it with nothing else at all.
Yeah, totally agree there. I like this one from Rusky Babes. It looks like the era they made who looked like Emma Peel. Yeah, it looks like from the Avengers. Absolutely agree with you. So, yes, indeed. So, yes, that's a bit of a dodgy one. What can I say? But speaking of dodgy, now we've got an absolute ripper moment coming up here, kids. So we're going to be talking about, do you like these slides? I hope you're enjoying them. We're going to be talking about this. And for those who have been following this story for the past month or two, are going to love what's coming up next. All right, so the story so far for those who've been watching now, there are a couple of people who I don't think have watching now who haven't been keeping up with what's going on. Aaron's been in this long, drawn-out conversation with a dude over somewhere in Asia who's selling dodgy products. And there's been this ongoing discussion between yourself and this other person who we now know is called Ronnie about the products that they're seeing. So the idea is that they're promoting these products on their website. Aaron's buying them, and what's turning up is the wrong product, right? And they're either the wrong thing or they're being really badly made or whatever else. And of course, Aaron showed Ronnie our show last week, and he actually watched it, picked out all these bits and realized we were hanging shit on him, right? Well, anyway, the conversation has gone a bit further because Ronnie and Aaron are now conversing after all that took place. So before we get into the correspondence, this is a funny one that Rusky Babe sent through, I think. And tell us all about this, dude.
So this is one of those things that Russell put up on the Sci-Fi Zone page, which is just perfect to bring up in the Greg King section, where a guy ordered a PlayStation 5, which everyone knows are really hard to get and super expensive at the moment, online from Amazon. And do you know what he was sent?
A bag of rice.
A bag of rice.
Well, they're similar, aren't they?
Well, they probably weigh the same, but that's about it.
Unbelievable. A bag of rice. How's that? How do they screw that one up? So what do you reckon? What's the deal with that?
I don't think they screwed it up. I think that was a rip-off. I think he won't be able to get his money back and he's stuck with like a $1,000 bag of rice.
So you ordered something months ago and you got a gold chain. What was the item you ordered? Do you remember?
A Stargate bookend.
That's right. So Aaron ordered a Stargate bookend and he got an actual gold chain you put around your neck with like little trinkets on it. And it's like, yeah, right. What do you reckon's the deal with that?
We've got to remember with Amazon, there are some sellers that are Amazon and there's some sellers that use Amazon as a platform. As soon as they sell a $1,000 bag of rice, they probably pull all their information on Amazon and that's it. You're never going to get your money back again.
Yep, totally agree. And you are right. Ronnie's ripping off the customer again. Absolutely fantastic. Well, there's been a few people. This segment has now gotten some legs, and we've actually got some fan mail coming in from people who have absolutely loved it. I don't know if you want to read these out or not, but it's entirely up to you.
So we've got a few feedbacks from the last couple of weeks. Greg King's Cheaper Things is one of the funniest things I've seen on a live podcast like this. Keep up the good work, Greg, from Alan Cole. I think he's one of our regular viewers on YouTube.
Yep.
Greg King and the saga of Ronnie has been a highlight of the show for the last few weeks. I cannot wait to see what happens next, from Jeff Brooks. Buy more stuff from AliExpress. You know you want to, from Simi Taylor. And Ronnie is one of the greatest things to happen on this show. I can't believe he studied the episode so carefully. It's so brilliant. And was that from YouTube as well?
Yeah, that's Penmanovich, I think it is. So I'm not sure what the X is meant to be, but yeah.
So there you go. If Ronnie's watching, he's getting a bit of a fan club, isn't he?
Yeah, I tell you what. So
it's lucky.
Yeah. So the cool thing is, so the whole correspondence thing now. Ronnie's been watching the show. He knows we're now hanging shit on him, and he's probably going to watch this one as well, which is just bizarro. So he's become a bit of a regular viewer. But of course, the thing about rip-off companies like Ronnie's is they try to justify what it is that they're doing, selling dodgy products and sending in, because the idea being that if you advertise a fantastic product, someone buys it for $30 and they go, well, it's only $30. I'm not going to worry about it. But they end up selling 10,000 of these things. They make an absolute fortune, right? Selling very, very dodgy products. But of course, unbeknownst to Ronnie, Aaron, of course, was buying them deliberately to put on the show. So anyway, Ronnie now contacts Aaron to say, well, this is the reason why he's doing what he's doing. And once again, this is all text-based, so Aaron's going to have to read out what the correspondence is. But if you like what happened last week when Ronnie discovered our show, you should enjoy this because there's an absolute classic coming up. Go for it.
Hi, Aaron. If you go to American fast food chain like Burger King or McDonald's, you see item for sale on menu. When you get food, they look nothing like item on menu. This is how business works. Does McDonald's get complaints and get broke? No, they dominate the world with bad burgers. This is the same sales pitch we have. We do not know why some people complain. We show items, people buy items, we ship them out fast. Everybody happy. Now you see clearer how this works. All the best, Ronnie.
Now, I love the fact that he says everybody's happy. No, people aren't happy. That's the thing. I mean, how can he say that? He says, oh, we've sent this item. They're going to absolutely love it. And for those who remember the correspondence, he was always saying, what are you complaining about? You've got something, even if it's the wrong item. Stop your grizzling.
Yes, well, from last week, he's trying to justify selling dodgy stuff because I explained to him, if people come into the shop and see something, they know what they're getting. But if they see something online, they have to trust the pictures.
Now, the fact that he's brought up McDonald's, this is Ronnie's brought up McDonald's, right? Our McDonald's advertise an image but don't sell the same thing that looks like the image. That can only mean one thing. Ronnie now has a new name.
Hi, Ronnie McDonnie. I am in total agreement of what you say about fast food. The difference is this. Everybody expects what they get from fast food places. They are cheap and no one expects a Michelin star level meal. With collectibles, collectors want at least the item you are advertised, not a substitution of a lucky dragon. And I still don't have my Hobbit home or little shop of horror plant. All the best, Aaron.
Now, I'm going to say, when I read the Ronnie McDonnie, I absolutely lost it. I thought it was absolutely ingenious. So, what do you reckon? Eh? So, yes, he definitely does. Sounding happy. We've broken the vial as we do that. Isn't that absolutely unbelievable? And of course, for those who aren't aware, Aaron is still waiting for items from Ronnie to turn up. And Ronnie keeps saying, send an extra $10, because these things obviously haven't been shipped yet. So
I've had 4 items from him, but the very first item I ordered still hasn't arrived, and they keep asking me for more money to ship it because they're going to replace it for free.
Yeah, Ronnie McDonnie, how good is that? But believe it or not, it does actually get better. Now, this is what when Ronnie wrote back to Aaron.
Hi, Aaron. I a no clown. I know you joke. It made me laugh.
Well, it worked for me.
Cracked him up too. If the items we sold were expensive, I would understand hate. But you buy $200 item for $19, you can't expect $200 value. Pictures are just a guide. When you get is value for what you pay. So you understand what I mean. I understand though what you mean when item is the wrong thing. Maybe this was the new junior warehouse staff mistake. The dragons are popular and lucky item though. I see all items as good though. Maybe you and the Soul Greg King are too critical. All the best, Ronnie.
How about that? He's done the handball. He's like, he says, "Oh, it's not my fault. It's got to be the junior downstairs." I mean, imagine that rationale. I've ordered all this stuff off the internet, and you get all the wrong items, but I'm happy because I at least got something. I mean, how would that work in the grand scheme of things? I mean, seriously, unbelievable.
Do you know who I'm talking to? I'm talking to their customer service department, and they're blaming like the junior warehouse staff downstairs.
Absolutely unbelievable is exactly right. So there you go. All right. So clearly we can see holes in Ronnie's argument. If he's advertising $200 items and selling them for $20, you should still get the $200 item because that was what's pictured, not like as a guide. I know where he's coming from, but as you said, when you talk about collectibles, there's no hard and fast. It's got to be identical to what what they're promoting. So there you go. Ronnie is a player. Yes, he is. But we haven't finished yet because this is what Aaron wrote back.
Hi, Ronnie. I understand your view and think you don't understand the expectations that people have when ordering a product. I would love to hear your product review on some of the items we order. Would you be happy to give us some of your reviews on items? I can even give you a mini segment on the show and you will be as famous as the vial and you will have fans write to you demanding they show more items and you rate them. Could be fun, better to contact me, and that's the shop's email address there. If you are interested, send a photo of you if you would like us to replace the picture of the alien. I see what you did there. You blamed the bad shipments on the work experience, kid. Well played, Ronnie, my man. And I still haven't got my Hobbit home or little shop of horrors plant. All the best, Aaron.
So how about that? So we've dangled this massive carrot. Right, and you are right. They should be showing the actual. We know that. That's the thing. We know that, right? It's obvious. I mean, you order something off Amazon, eBay, whatever, you expect to get the item you're seeing, but of course they're not doing that because it's a scam. That's what it is, right? I mean, they're deliberately ripping people off. And as I said, if you sell items cheap and everybody gets them cheap, they go, "I'm not going to send it back for $20." They end up making tens of thousands of dollars out of it. You go for it, man.
I think what Daniel forgets is we have white person expectation of what we are going to receive on the internet. And for anyone who didn't see it, that was what someone else told us when we complained about their product. I think that was the Stargate bracelet.
Yeah, true. And Thomas says, but Aaron is the winner. And you are right, because we're doing this show. But if you were a legitimate buyer, you'd be pretty shitty. And because these things do look fantastic when you see them online. Please make this happen. Yes, exactly right. All right. Oh, here we go. Thomas is in the zone. We want Ronnie. We want Ronnie. All right. So this is the last, I think this is the last correspondence. This is what Ronnie wrote back to Aaron. And believe this if you will. This is, if you want to vote now, vote now. Here's your chance. I've even personally underlined the bit that you've got to read, kids. Here we go.
So I got this through different email address directly from him, not from AliExpress. Hi, Aaron. This is Ronnie from AliExpress. You tell me to mail you here about giving product reviews. I am happy to do this and have a segment on show and be famous. As you say, can be fun. I probably can't send a photo as conflict in interest would be bad for me. Ronnie Woo is not my real name, so this is fine to use. Can use little picture of big-eared guy. Now I know the joke. It is funny. Not a good idea to use own picture. If you're happy with this, let me know and return mail. All the best, Ronnie.
So what that's telling you is that throughout this entire time, he hasn't even used his real name. So if he's not using his... I mean, you don't need the surname, just Ronnie. But you'd like to think, if you've ever contacted customer service for anything, you'd like to think the person you're speaking to is that's their name. They're just not invented one out of fresh air. What a scam! What an absolute scam! Unbelievable! And there's the final picture we've got to chuck in.
I kind of think it would be unusual for someone in a warehouse in China to be called Ronnie, but you never know, do you? So that's where we are. I have sent him back. I won't put what I've sent back until we see what he says, because I couldn't actually put everything he sent to me because he said some was sensitive and he could get in trouble. So we're just seeing how this plays out. But we could have a new member of the Rip It Off the Card family. I hope the Soul Greg King is not a jealous person.
So the funny thing is, it's not Greg King's cheap with things. It's Ronnie Woo's awesome.
Or as Chad suggested, it should be ship it out the factory.
Yeah, exactly right. So how good is that? So he wants his own segment. And of course, the irony being that if he gets his own segment, we actually say, okay, Ronnie, review a product. He'll tell all his friends, guess what? I'm on this show. Check it out. And our reviews will go through the roof and we'll become YouTube overnight sensations and all the rest of it. What do you reckon about that, kids, eh? Yes, you're right. He wants the tail cut. In fact, the Soul Greg King will just get dropped off. You know, who the Soul who? Lost him. So, yes, very, very cool. So, absolutely love it. What do you reckon, old son?
Yes. So, it's lucky Ronnie's been talking to us because we haven't had anything delivered for a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, especially your Hobbit home and your little shop of horrors plant. So, yes, very, very cool. All right. So, yes, we'll keep an eye on what happens with the good old Ronnie Woo and his reviews. Very exciting stuff. But in the interim, it's still time for some exciting stuff to get your head around. And, of course, it means it's time for the old Lord Vile's Vile File.
Yes.
Oh,
it's a bit of a different one this week because it isn't a particular Vile file on any product or any particular category. The Vile has decided to use our program to launch his new service. Do you know what service that could be?
I have no idea, but I tell you what, I reckon that people watching the show who are Vile fans or what they call acolytes will be trying to sign up in a heartbeat.
Well, this is fantastic because the Vile is starting his own Vile network. And you can see there, he tried to buy a second-hand television station, but he couldn't. So that was actually a disused nuclear power plant in Chernobyl that he's going to be broadcasting from. But he is going to set up Vile Flicks. And as you can see there, a unique programming, Ultra SD, which you'd appreciate, wouldn't you, Dags? State-of-the-art 50s tech and zero customer service. So it sounds like Ronnie could actually work for the Vile as well. Yeah,
I totally agree with you. The Moneybag Sullivan has said is the Vile dating service. I tell you what, that way, come to our meet and greet and be violated.
I don't think we can go there, can we?
I'm just going to put this on. We've got a new viewer here. Just want to put this up there. Do we get to the Gerry Anderson? Yes, it's actually coming up to 2 more segments, which is probably about another 20 minutes away. So we get through all this stuff first, and then we get to Gerry Anderson a bit later on. So if you can hang in there, Vinian, it'll all be good stuff. So yes, don't stress. We are on our way there. Good to be big bit of the old Gerry. So there you go. But in the interim, we're looking at Violeflix. So what would that entail? Getting some violations happening with the old Violeflix, Mr. Aaron?
Well, he's cut through all the red tape of setting up a file distributing service by not getting approved or being certified or getting any permits, and he's just going to launch it. So I think have we got a launch video?
No, we haven't, because it was too flashy in the face, and I thought this was going to set everybody off having a fit. So we're just going to go straight into the options.
So some of the things we're having, he will be having on the Violeflix, top British favourites like Love Thy Neighbour and Love Thy Neighbour in Australia, and the ever popular Mind Your Language, which he intends to bring to a new generation of fans that haven't seen them because they've been buried in the archives for so long.
Yeah, and the other one he's adding in, which hasn't been included, because it's British, that's right. I was going to say the English version of Kingswood Country. Not that one exists, but I had to try and get the gag in there somewhere. So there you go.
And of course, he'll be, showing the final seasons of Doctor Who, the Chibnall years, which, of course, finds a perfect home on Violeflix.
Good stuff. I mean, Violeflix just sounds so good already, doesn't it, eh?
Well, VHS in the mail. What are you talking about, William? Beta in the mail. Beta. So the Disney movies that you won't see on Disney Plus or anywhere else. The Song of the South, one of those all-time classics that hasn't been seen for decades.
Oh, yeah. What's the one on the right? Is that from the same movie, is it?
That is the Song of the South as well.
Yeah, very, very good. I love it. So Disney movies you won't see anywhere else. What else we got going?
Sitcoms direct from Beta Masters off air. So Small Wonder. Everybody loves MASH, but have you seen After MASH? And of course, everyone loves I Love Lucy and the Lucy Show. But do you remember Life with Lucy, the often not repeated unfunny version?
No, I don't. Now, at this point, people must be thinking, oh, this is awesome. It's like, do you want more? Yes, you do. Is that right?
Yes. The best action series at your fingertips. Like, forget Battlestar Galactica. Like, the whole series is a waste of time. They don't even get to Earth. But Galactica 80, where they find Earth, that's where the action is. And, of course, one of the top favourites from the 80s, The Powers of Matthew Starr.
Right.
Do you remember that one, Dags?
Oh, I tell you what, especially I like the version of Matthew Starr where there were 2 R's and Starr, not one, but that's okay.
The Powers of Matthew Starr.
I don't know. I'm like the vial. I'm positively salivating here at all these options that are available.
So, yeah, forgotten classics like Tale of the Gold Monkey, Manimal, Automan, and Mr. Merlin.
Oh, mate, be still my beating heart. Where is it all going there, Mr. Aaron? Oh, check it out. You get bonuses as well.
Subscribe to our special inaugural period and you will get Game of Thrones Series 8 as a disincentive gift.
That is absolutely, and you're right, Bob. Slipstream is the one that's coming next week, so don't you worry about that. So there must be some absolute benefits of joining us, the Violeflix like this.
Yep, at Violeflix we have stars to spare. As you can see, Bobcat Goldthwait and Paulie Shaw and Halle Berry, who's probably the only Oscar winner on Violeflix, but all who hold their own Razzies as well. Now, what other streaming platform can brag that they have so many Razzies under the belt?
Yeah, totally agree. And if you love these absolute classics, of course, they've got to have the ultimate visual effects. State-of-the-art
visual effects, special effects that'll put your teeth on edge. And you can see The Rock's teeth on edge. Well, the CG version of him from The Lion King. And, of course, you can see Superman's teeth there because they've taken out the mustache. Like, I think the guy that did the special effects for George 3, what was his name? Matt Lyons? Matt Lyons, I think his name. And
I don't know what you're talking about, dude. It looks completely real to me. So there you go. So
real as the dinosaur.
Yep.
So if you're looking for a streaming service that will leave you feeling violated, then subscriptions are opening soon.
How good is that? So what are you trying to tell me about the old Vile flicks there, Mr. Aaron?
Well, what we're saying is he's taken on the airwaves and he's well and truly violated them.
Oh, God, that was pathetic, dude.
Yeah, well, the Vile, it scrapes the bottom of the barrel every week.
Oh, geez, I tell you what. You got all these people thinking of all these old movies and TV shows and stuff. Enough of the old Vile flicks. Oh, that is just grouse. Unbelievable. Yes, good stuff. All right, we're way ahead of schedule here, which is absolutely fantastic. And someone asked earlier, they would forget the crap, get to the Gerry Anderson stuff, will you? And we are getting there. We've got one more segment left to do, and of course, that's the one we get all this interaction from the entire audience. So just wait for it because it's time for this.
Ooh, baby, do you know that's what?
All right. Now, I like this one from Mr. Greg. Yes, how much will the Vile pay us to join? Yes, that is a very good question. So, yes, very, very cool. All right. So, what are we talking about tonight, Miss, for the eBay section, Mr. Aaron?
Well, we're looking at one of the newer collectibles, which is, I guess, limited edition 4K Blu-ray and some of the DVD box sets that are hard to find or titles that are hard to get. So, if you're a bit of a DVD collector, this is the night for you.
I like this one from William, the X-Viles. Oh, that's an awesome name for a show. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
That's after you date on the Vile dating, they become X's, the X-Files.
Yes, I do like the sound of that. Now, we haven't even shown you the first item. Mr. Slippery Phil has decided to slip that in for $2 and Ange has gone for 50 cents. We haven't even shown you what it is yet. And it is all good stuff. So here we go. This is where you get to put in your answers as to what you think the items sold for. Don't cheat. Don't Google them. Don't look it up. Just take a bit of a guess.
So this is Resident Evil Retribution 4K. I don't know if it's a limited edition Blu-ray. Only watched once, 7 bids. This could be quite a hard title to find. What do you think, Dags?
I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, I love the first Resident Evil, but I didn't really think much of the sequels. And 4K Blu-ray. Do you need a special Blu-ray player to play 4K? I suppose you would, wouldn't you? Really?
Well, you have to. I think most. I think is it PlayStations play 4K, and you have to have a TV that can display 4K picture,
sure.
obviously.
Yeah.
So anyone who's into movies, it's one of those technologies that a lot of people have upgraded to and look for the special editions.
Yeah, so if you want to see Miller in absolutely high definition, what do you think? All right, so earlier we had Phil at 2, we had Ange at 50 cents, Moneybag Silence at $15, Bob is at $100, bloody hell. Thomas at 40, excuse me, Collins at 5. There's a bit of a range of prices here. Violating Miller, as a Vile should often do, is the Vile at 25. Collins said, what was that, $50? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, 5, not 5, 50. That's cool. Kelvin's at 10. Williams at 20. Glennis, who's on YouTube, is at 20. And DJ, good to see. Actually, sorry, you need to put a price in there, Mr. Oh, yeah, okay, you need a 4K player and a 4K TV. Yep, okay, fair enough then. So just need to put in a bid there, kiddies, and see what you reckon it went for. Resident Evil Retribution. I'm not even too sure. I think there's a third movie or the fourth movie. 4K. I can't imagine it being a bit of a high demand item, but you never know. What does everybody else think it's sold for? 7 bids. So somebody out there was keen to complete their collection. What do you reckon there? It is very, very groovy. 4K ultra high definition Blu-ray, near new, watched once. In other words, I watched it once and they decided to sell it off. It went for, how much you reckon it went for, kids? It went for a whopping $7.50. Wouldn't it be worth producing at that price?
Did Colin get that one?
No, because he changed his bid to $50. So Kelvin's the closest, I think. So there you go. Colin, if you had stayed at $5, you might have got it, son. So, but there you go.
Yes.
What do you reckon? Anything you want to say about this, dude?
No, I guess it's one of those things where you buy something new and then it goes down in price.
Yeah, well, that's right. They bought it, watched it once, probably paid more than $7.50, and they said, that's it. Yeah, time to offload it to somebody else. So there you go. So just because it's 4K, it doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be a winner. Or is it?
So here's an interesting one. Zack Snyder's Justice League 4K Blu-ray Steelbook. This one was released. Well, everyone knows about the Snyder Cut of Justice League, how fans demanded it be released, and then it came out a couple of years after the original Justice League. There was a bit of demand for this. I know I looked around for it, and it was sold out at most places when I looked for it. So, still, I don't know if it was the best movie ever, but it was better than the theatrical version. How much would you pay for the Snyder Cut of Justice League?
See, what doesn't make any sense, it's not the 4K thing that's the big deal. It's the fact it comes in the box, right? The mother box and all the rest of it. So it's the gimmicky side of it. I mean, you do wonder if anybody's actually going to watch it just because it's 4K. So, yes, interesting indeed. But I didn't realize they actually produced the hard copy version. I thought it was just a streaming copy only, if that makes any sense at all. All right, Anne just said $50. Thomas is at 675. As I said, the box alone is probably where the money is. Phil has slipped in a nice $200 there. Colin's at 175. Bob is at 50. Moneybag Sullivan's at 45. Glennis is at 30. Kelvin's at 35. William is at 200. Okay, so yes. So you do wonder if it had just been a normal release and not the 4K version, and probably still would have sold for a pretty high price, because, as I said, I can't imagine people are paying the extra money for the 4K thing and chucking the box out the window. So there you go. All right, so what does everybody else think? And sorry for the picture. We don't have a proper picture for this. And there were 15 bids for this as well, so there's definitely a bit of interest. Violating the mother box is the Vial at 150. DJ, you've gone for $90. Very good stuff. All right, so how much you reckon it went for? Zack Snyder's Justice League, whether you like it or not, is totally irrelevant. You'd like to think it has both the color version and the black and white version on it, but yeah, whatever. Comes with a mother box. Very, very cool. Very, very exciting. How much do you reckon it went for? It went for a whopping $2,400. What's the deal with that, Mr. Aaron?
Well, it's one of those things, when they released this as physical media, it got a very small run. The original Justice League hadn't done that well. And this, although it was demanded by fans, they did not see that it was going to be as in demand as it actually was. So this came out and sold out the day it came out, and then it's been going for many, many times what it cost ever since. And you can see there was 15 bids on that one. So a lot of people after it.
Yeah, and look at this. And Thomas is happy because you're about $2,000 under the price, but that's okay. At least you are the winner. And isn't that ridiculous? $2,500, mate, unbelievable. For what? So yeah, I can't imagine it's for the 4K thing. It's got to be for the box. So it's what the Babu freaks. So how nuts is that? 15 people and selling $4,500. Crikey,
yeah.
Mikey.
It's one of those things you can understand Jeffro's pain when he's tracking down these limited editions. If you miss it when it first comes out, then you're forever looking on the secondary market and paying crazy prices.
Yeah, no, totally agree with you. So there you go, kids. Who would have thunk it? Eh? So yes, very, very cool. All right. Oh, here we go. Back to MCU.
So we're back to another fan favorite, Captain Marvel, another 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. Will this be more popular than Resident Evil? Will it be more popular than Justice League, or will it be less popular than those movies?
Yeah, there was a bit of a mixed bag of bunnies when it came to reviewing this movie as to what they thought of it. I like this from Colin here. Did Ronnie sell the box previously to this? So Captain Marvel in 4K Ultra HD, brand spanking new. So how good is that? Angie's gone the $2. Bob has gone for $5. There's obviously not a lot of optimism here. Philip has gone for $20. So William has gone for $5. What does everybody else? Nobody thinks is worth a lot of money. It's brand new, guys. Brand spanking, the latest and the greatest. Where was I? William's at $5. Colin is at $8. Kelvin's 50 cents. Oh, cheapest creepers. Good old Moneybag Sullivan. He's not chucking much money into this one. $10. Violating Captain Marvel, as one should often do, is the Vial at 15. Thomas, 2005. You bucked the trend completely, dude. It's just the DVD. Actually, well, it's a Blu-ray. $2,500. Oh, I think that's a bit optimistic, son. You'll have to sell the previous item just to pay for this one. Glennis has said 20. So there you go. Brand spanking new. Yay, team. I think most people who have 4K TVs are probably just streaming all their 4K content rather than actually buying it as physical media. But there you go. And Greg has said that, yes, that's in the DVDs as a Blu-ray, but for $2 at the garage sale. So, yes, very cool stuff. So how much do you reckon it went for, kids? Captain Marvel, brand spanking new, got to be very cool. DJ has chucked in 35. I know DJ's typing a lot of comments here, but sorry, dude, we're just focusing on the prices at the moment. So how much do you reckon it went for? Captain Marvel, 4K, absolutely Ultra HD Blu-ray, yay. Brand new. This would have cost like 50, 60 bucks back in the old days. How much did it go for? It went for a whopping 5 bids on it. $6.50. Chucking them away.
5 bids, but low bids. But it's the case of probably a lot of these were sold when they came out because it was a big Marvel title. Captain Marvel, love it or hate it, is in the top 5 of Marvel top grossing movies, I think. Or it might be in the top 10 now. We've had a couple of new ones. But obviously one that isn't so rare and isn't so collectible.
See, the funny thing about this is when Blu-rays first came out, they used to be quite expensive and their price plummeted really, really quickly once they realized that people who own DVDs weren't going into the Blu-ray market. And you would have thought for this, 4K, the latest and the greatest, high definition, yada, 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 would have gone for an absolute killing, but clearly not. So, and I reckon brand new, I have no idea what it would have been brand new in JB Hi-Fi, but yes, Thomas, yes, at $2.5 you were way off the target, son. So absolutely nuts. And DJ said that apparently streaming in 4K is quite hard. Yeah, you probably need your massive NBNs and all this other technological stuff to make it work. So yes, you don't want your Captain Marvel to be going jiggy in terms of the picture quality. That wouldn't be very good at all. But yeah, I've got to admit, I was very surprised to see that. So there you go. All right.
Well, here's another one. A single movie, The Amazing Spider-Man Blu-ray Steelbook box set. This is number 52 of 700. So this is a limited edition one. Spider-Man may be a little bit more popular than Captain Marvel.
I like the fact that it says Amazing Spider-Man half. It's 1 and 2, kids.
One and two. But they're half as good as the other Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, exactly right. Those who buy copies still prefer DVDs. Well, I mean, DVD for the most part is still an acceptable technology to use, and a lot of Blu-ray players upscale DVD anyway. So it's only for the real cinephiles, the hardcore collectors, who tend to go to Blu-ray and 4K. But anyway, Amazing Spider-Man, what do you reckon it went for, kids? So Colin has said 75. Moneybag Sullivan is at 50. Thomas is a 350. Glennis has chucked in a 30. What does everybody else think? Violating the Spider-Man, as the Vial often does, as the Vial at 80. Spideys, I love that. William has said 120. There are 11 bids on this, by the way, so there's a bit of interest in this. What do other people think? The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 4K Blu-ray Steel Book and limited edition 2. Probably limited because nobody wanted it. Where are we? 350. That's 350, I think he's trying to say. Very good. I like it. You're trying to get all like, what do you call it? Like rappy and like really, really cool with the technology and the terminology there. Mr. Phil has slipped in a nice $75 there as well. All right. Very, very cool. All right, so how much do you reckon it went for? The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 4K Blu-ray Steelbook, 50. Number 52 of 700. Bloody hell! So how much do you reckon it went for, kids? It went for a whopping $2,500. What's the deal, Mr. Aaron?
Well, this is one of those things that does my head in, and what DJ is saying is absolutely true, because we're at the end of physical media. There is a lot of titles that get very low production runs. What would have been considered in the height of DVDs a production run that probably wouldn't have been worth pressing is now a high production run. And that means when you do get limited ones of movies that people do want, and there are a lot of people that do prefer to have physical media because it might disappear off Netflix or things like that. When you do get these really popular movies where there is a big fan base like Spider-Man, and they do sell out on the opening day, or you can only get them from a different club if you're involved with some of the club collecting DVDs, then they go for an absolute fortune on the secondary market.
Well, you know what? Nobody was even remotely close. William was at 100. I'm not putting anybody up because everybody was so far off the mark. And I agree with you, Rusky Babes, that as far as I'm concerned, nobody won it. You're all like over $2,000 behind the 8 ball on that one, kids. So, but yeah. I tend to agree with you. I mean, and you're right. It's similar to the mother boxing, and the mother boxing I can kind of get because you get the fancy box and all the rest of it. But that's just ridiculous. I mean, imagine showing that to your other half, saying, "Hey, honey, I spent $2,500 on the day the interest rates have all gone up on a friggin' limited edition bloody."
No. That's when you've got to find Spankin's Guide to Slipping It In, and just get it into the house without anyone knowing what you paid for it. You're going down a really dark path there if you start telling your significant other, I dropped $2,500 on movies I already have on different formats.
That's just and you put it on the shelf and you go, yeah, well, I can't see the value. That is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I don't know what happened there, kids, but that's some people need their heads read. All right, so here we go. For those who need some extra shit in their house, forget about buying one disc, buy a shitload.
DVDs, Blu-rays, 4K discs, bulk lot. I think it says over 1,300 of them, and over is that 590 seasons of TV. Now, the interesting thing here is I couldn't put all the photos up. There is some amazing stuff in there. There's the long sold out different editions of Star Trek. I think there was every single Star Trek TV series on DVD and Blu-ray, and then there was a whole lot of amazing other things. I looked at this option and go, oh, I would probably like to buy this. I don't know where I'd put it, and it would be very unwise, but this was a good lot of Blu-rays and DVDs and collectible box sets. And there wasn't the Spider-Man one in there that we just saw, but there was a lot of limited editions in there too.
It's kind of funny, isn't it? Because you think this is going to be a pickup only. No one is going to be able to ship this. And you do wonder, I'm just going to deviate. Had this been 20 years ago, you could probably put this massive price tag on it, right? But today, DVD is a dying technology, as we discussed earlier. Yeah. And there's certainly a lot of argument to say that there's no value in them. But if there are things that are on DVD that you can't get on a streaming service or you haven't got it already, here's a chance to buy everything in one big lot. So it's a bit of a brain strainer. And the fact that with the prices that people are putting in here, I think in the same way, because you wind the clock back 20 years ago, there would be ones in front of just about everything. So Andrew said 75 cents. Thomas said 5 cents. So they're obviously thinking this is just all rubbish. Christy, good to see Christy joining the show. He's chucked it. Let's got a round figure of $1. Kelvin has said 500, and Moneybags has done the complete opposite, gone to $12,000. And DJ has gone to 20,000. Collins at 1,900. Williams at 1,800. Rusky Babes at 350. And violating these DVDs, and even he couldn't violate 590 seasons of TV, is the Violet 350 as well. So nobody really knows. You could argue that if you were missing certain bits, you'd buy all this and throw the rest out. Funnily enough, I had a mate of mine. He was a huge DVD collector, and he actually went around to all the video stores when they were shutting down because they were chucking out, one disc for 20 cents or whatever, and he'd just be buying cases of these things because he loved the movie so much. But you do wonder, you get what you want and throw out the rest. I'll get to you in a sec, dude. 300 from Glennis and 2,500 from Mr. Phil, who slipped that bit in. So before I show the price, anything you want to say about this before we move on?
You can't really see from the auction, from the pictures there, but when you would enlarge the other pictures, it looked like an entire storage unit. So it didn't look like someone's house. It looked like racks in a storage unit. So maybe it was an old video library that went down and they're selling off the storage unit, but it was a very impressive amount of DVDs and Blu-rays and bits and pieces.
Well, one person went in and said, yep, I'll have the entire lot. One bid, all groovy. How much you reckon it went for, kids? Either went for chicken feed or it went for an absolute fortune. And as we've seen the previous items, we've had a complete mixed bag of bunnies regarding that. It went for a whopping straight $1,000. Done and dusted. Pack up, go home.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I was going through the titles in that, and there were some of the titles. I think DJ was saying earlier, you can go through title to title, and some are worth nothing and some are collectible. It was a good spread of really good stuff. So I'm betting whoever bought that's going to be split up and resold on eBay and probably get 10 times what they paid for it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. William, you get $800 back, dude, which is kind of cool. So there you go. So, but yeah, people obviously are now offloading the physical media for multitudes of reasons, and it's not as interesting as it once was, which is completely understandable. So there you go. Having said that, there is that argument, and it's a valid argument too. Streaming is all well and good, but the moment they take the product off the air and you go, how can I watch my show? And those with physical media going, hey, I still can. Yeah.
So I don't think Disney will ever do it, but there are so many people who want box sets of The Mandalorian and different series, and they're not releasing them.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a very good point. I mean, at the moment, there's so much stuff coming out. Will you stick with Star Wars, but even Star Trek? it's probably just like it's not cost worthy to do it. And so once those shows are off the air, if people haven't pirated them or done digital downloads, they're going to be like sitting there going, "Oh, wouldn't mind slipping in a bit of the old Book of Boba Fett." Can't get it. Too bad, so sad, son.
Or maybe Ronnie at Caribbean Gardens will have a cheap box set of them.
Yep, totally agree. And Moneybags has said that's a bargain regarding the. Yeah, you're right. I mean, when you do the numbers, yeah, it's 50 cents a DVD, and of course, you can't imagine how much was spent buying this shit in the first place. So,
yeah,
there you go. Very, very cool. Yes, was it physical media from my cold dead hand? Yes, some people absolutely love it and will hang on to it forever. So good on them too. All right, so finally, look at that. We're right on time too, which is particularly groovy. All right, now we're at the section that everybody wanted to sort of see. We're going completely away from all the new stuff. We're going back in time, Mr. Aaron. What are we talking about tonight?
Well, we've had a particularly successful couple of months looking at the output of Irwin Allen when we looked at his Lost in Space and shows like that. And when we were looking at who we could look at next, there was another particular producer and director and writer who kind of has spawned as many beloved series, or even more maybe, than Irwin Allen, and that is, of course, Gerry Anderson. So this is our first look in a multi-part series, because he has had such an amazing output at the shows and collectibles that have been associated with Gerry Anderson. And you can see here really just how many classic and beloved shows there are. Today we're going to be looking at we're going through in order, so we're starting at the 50s, but you can see some of the big hitters are Thunderbirds and Space 1999, Captain Scarlet and Stingray, UFO, Terrorhawks, all stuff that if you're a sci-fi fan, even if you didn't love it, you would have seen it and you would respect how popular it actually is. Did you ever become a fan of Super Marionation, Dags?
Well, it's kind of funny because clearly because of my age and all the rest of it, I mean, Thunderbirds was the go. You know, we're not talking about Thunderbirds tonight for those who are distressed about it. The thing about it, of course, it was always early on at 6 in the morning on a Saturday. And I thought I was the two types of kids, those who get up really early in the morning to watch Thunderbirds and those who sleep in until 10 in the morning. I was the latter. I slept in until 10 in the morning. But it's interesting because when you start looking at the history of Gerry Anderson's work, you go, the dude was a pioneer, like in terms of this fantastic concept, which even though some people like today would say, oh, they're just puppets on strings, but the effort that was put into it and where it started from and how it sort of evolved, I can imagine how, like, and as we're going to see in a few minutes, producing these products would have been such a buzz because you're actually groundbreaking every single day. Every time you're doing something new and different. And how do you improve on your product and what do you do differently? I mean, that's awesome. So few people get to do that rather than just color by numbers. When you're inventing the technology, you're creating it, enhancing what came before you and doing something new. That, I mean, you can't imagine working on these shows would have been fantastic. So, yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. When television started, and he was a pioneer in very early television, I think the 50s is the earliest we've gone back on this show looking at anything so far. A lot of television shows for kids were puppet shows. And I had to think about this, and it's really interesting. Pre-TV, children's entertainment, theatre might have been a bit too expensive to take kids to, but it would have been puppet shows. And particularly in England, you'd have Punch and Judy and things like that. So when TV producers and executives were looking at what would work for kids' TV, because you've got to remember, TV started when it first started. It was an hour a day. It was something very special, and it slowly grew till it was 24 hours. Even when I grew up, even what Dags was saying, Thunderbirds started the station when it started broadcasting at 6. TV was not a 24-hour thing.
Yeah, when in my time, Channel 9 was the only one that went through the night. Yep. And like Phil's mentioned, he'd get to watch Thunderbirds at 6 a.m. on Channel 9. All the other stations would close, but 9 would keep going. And you are right. It was always 6 o'clock in the morning on bloody Saturday. And it went for like years and years and years and years. I mean, I wasn't even aware they're just repeating all the episodes. But you are right. A lot of kids got up, and that's how they got introduced to it. And
now, I don't know if you would remember this, Dags. You might. I've always been a massive television fan. And if you put the TV on before the show started, there was a test pattern, and people would remember the test pattern. But then on the ABC, there was actually a countdown clock, and it was a very, it was a computer clock that just slowly counted down. And when it got to 6, when it started, me and my brother would trace the second hand as it went round the screen till it got to 6, because then we knew the entertainment was about to start. But we digress. We're talking about Gerry Anderson and kids' TV. So when television started in the UK, you would have a lot of very popular puppet shows. You had, for those who remember it, Bill and Ben, the flower
Mm.
pot men. You had Muffin the Mule, which was another puppet. And even in America, you had things like Howdy Doody and things like that, which were aimed at kids. And it was one of the very early things that was used to entertain kids, puppet shows and cartoons. We've kind of lost the puppet show. And I guess what's happened is it's switched over to CGI now. And even Thunderbirds is CGI now. And it's lost a lot of the charm that it had when it was the original puppets. But Gerry Anderson started off on puppet shows a bit different from what a lot of us might remember. And we're looking at the early stuff and how it led into the later science fiction shows and the other things that we all know and love. So I hope everyone's happy with this. Russ will be happy because we're getting through to Supercar, which is something he was very excited about.
Unless we accidentally run out of time. Sorry, dude, you'll have to wait till next time. Only joking. Yeah, and you are right. So we're talking about it. This is kind of funny because we're talking about a medium, which is television, which was still so new back in the day that everything that was coming out was brand new. And of course, you had to watch it. If you missed it, there ain't going back. There's no reruns. There's no videos, no DVDs or that sort of stuff. You had to sit and watch it no matter what. And of course, everything was just a learning experience for all the people producing it also. And of course, Gerry was at the forefront of all this stuff occurring. And, you know, it's amazing to sort of see how his career progressed and where things led to. But shall we kick it off, Mr. Aaron?
We shall. So Gerry Anderson had quite a extensive career, but we're going to look at the stuff that starts with the puppets and the super marionation. Now, I have never seen any of this show, and sadly, like a lot of original British television, only one episode of it exists in the archives, and I think that might be a partial film reel of the first episode. And this was The Adventures of Twizzle. Had you ever heard of Twizzle?
No. Definitely not. I assume it never got screened here. Am I right?
I don't think it was ever screened here. It ran for 1 year in 1957. It was a puppet show. They weren't referred to as super marionation yet, and we're going to see how that kind of evolved. It was a show, and a lot of the shows that Gerry Anderson did were shows about people or a group of people that have extraordinary powers or do extraordinary things, and Twizzle was no different. Twizzle was a little boy, and I had to Google it because it looks like a girl, but it was meant to be a boy, who had arms and legs that could stretch out, and they were like the straws that you can stretch, kind of thing. So
yeah, I think that's where the name came from, the Twizzle sticks. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So sorry, go on.
Go ahead. No. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so for Gerry Anderson fans, you're probably thinking, oh, this is like so far. It's like doing student movies, you know, and who gives a rat's ass? But I mean, you've got to start somewhere, and this was the start, and everything sort of progressed from there. And believe it or not, as we're about to show you, I mean, even though you may not have even heard of Twizzle or know anything about it, they did produce merchandise for it.
Yeah, and this is the other thing about Rip It Off the Card. We like our merchandise here. And this is an interesting show for me because every show we've done where we've looked at merchandise, the early Stretch Armstrong, I've had or collected or owned quite a bit of it. In this show, out of all the merchandise we're showing, there is only one piece that I have owned from the whole show tonight, which is unusual. I've never owned or even seen any Twizzle merchandise in Australia. Like a lot of British shows, especially for that period, the merchandise that came out was very annuals and books and kids' books. And this was obviously aimed at a younger market. I do find the artwork quite charming. It reminds me of some of the early Enid Blyton sort of illustrations, or if anyone knows, the Rupert the Bear annuals and things like that. So even though I never grew up with this, it does hold that sort of charm from the artwork of the period, and it is quite collectible. How collectible? Well, I guess that's up for debate, because when I did this episode, I researched it on eBay, and you can buy these items on eBay, and you would think because it's the 50s, they're quite expensive and quite rare. Now, there wasn't a ton of it on eBay, but most of it was up on eBay, and it all seemed to be sitting at buy it now between £20 and £100, which I thought, if I could get Doctor Who stuff from that era for the same price, I'd be laughing. So
yeah, it all comes down to just what you're exposed to. And if it's a show, even it doesn't even say Gerry Anderson created it. I mean, that would be for hardcore people. And even if you bought some of this stuff and said, oh, look, I'm a Gerry Anderson collector, I've got this, most other fans would say, yeah, I'm really not interested. And as Rusky Babe says, yeah, sometimes you've got the toys and not the shows. And a good example of that is probably some of this.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where it was merchandise, so it must have been popular at the time. You can tell by, I guess, the colourfulness and the artwork that it was aimed at younger kids. But there was board games and jigsaws, and there were some particularly nice sets of cards. There was a card game, and there was a snap card game. So it was obviously popular enough at the time for merchandisers to take a punt on it. What is really interesting, in the 50s, there couldn't have been many tie-in merchandise to TV shows. So I found it interesting that even back then there was a lot of merchandise.
It's also interesting too because of the colours, right? Because the thing was obviously filmed in black and white. Whether the colours were actually representative of the real colours of the puppets, or whether they just made them up, because they seem relatively consistent from the jigsaw here, and the party game up there, and all the rest of it. So yeah, you just sort of do wonder about that, but yeah, very interesting.
It is interesting. I could not find a single colour image of the original puppets or any photos from the show from behind the scenes. So I guess the artists would have just been making their own colours up, and no one could say they were wrong.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And of course, the fact is only the show doesn't exist anymore, except for, you said, for the one episode, and chances are it's probably pretty poor quality anyway. Even if you were to do the ultimate Gerry Anderson, like, with the fan thing, where it's just every bit of work that he's done. I mean, the fact there's only one episode, he couldn't create a fan base, even if you wanted to, because there's just no material there anymore. We're talking about the irony of the fact that they're using marionettes, and of course the colors of the marionettes, and these ones don't match up to the previous pictures. But there you go.
Yeah, well, there we have. There weren't many examples of this online. So you've got the. This is an interesting fun factoid, because I actually have that book in our shop, in our Gerry Anderson cabinet, the Guide to Complete Gerry Anderson.
Oh, yeah.
So that's in Aaron's Collectables at the moment. But
Free plug.
Yeah, the puppets there are from Pelham Puppets, which are quite a famous company, and you can see there one of the pictures isn't just Twizzle, it's Torchy the Battery Boy as well, which is what we're going to look next, because it was the next show that Gerry Anderson went on to. What's interesting, these puppets are very hard to find, and you can imagine they're the kind of toys that were probably quite easily damaged, and you'd get the strings caught up, and they've got clothing and things, and could get easily dirty or broken or destroyed. So these have held their value, probably because beyond Gerry Anderson, there is a group of collectors that collect these puppets and try and get all of them. So if you were a Gerry Anderson fan and you've got every Thunderbirds and every Fireball and every Stingray, and you start collecting the other stuff, this is the stuff that's hard to get from very early on in the game.
Totally agree. Colin's already actually asked you. Here's your free plug. How much are you selling the Gerry Anderson book for? Do you remember?
I think it's $29, but if you come in and say you saw it from Rip It Off the Card, it's $25.
Oh, mate, they're chucking them away. What can I say? How very, very cool. So the cool thing is, like, everything's, as I said earlier, is a starting point. So he's made Twizzle. The opportunity comes along to do another show, and of course, the key thing about another show is you increase the quality of the technology using to do the puppets, and of course, everything's a step forward to where we eventually end up. And as you said, after Twizzle comes Torchy the Battery Boy, a couple of years later on.
Yeah, so this is 1959, so it's a couple of years later. And you can see with Gerry Anderson's career, he might not have chose or wanted to particularly be involved with puppets at the beginning of his career, but it was something that he ultimately was good at, and he was good at storytelling, and the effects got better, the techniques for using the puppetry got better, and he obviously became known for it because he obviously kept getting greenlit to do these different shows. Now, Torchy the Battery Boy was a different show. It had more than just sort of the one character. It had Torchy the Battery Boy, who, of course, has a torch lodged in his forehead, much like a Dalek has an eye stalk in their forehead. Mr. Bumbledrop, Bossy Boots, of course, is a woman that looks a lot like Lucy from the Snoopy comics, and Loopsy. Now, again, Torchy the
it's Lopsy.
Lopsy. So, of course, Torchy the Battery Boy is another series. Some episodes do exist. I had never seen it until I was doing research for the show. It's kind of another very British charming show that's mainly aimed at kids. So it isn't anything that if you've seen all the Thunderbirds and everything else, you go, I'll check this out for some more action. It's not that kind of show at all. It's It's more aimed at kids. Had you ever seen this one, mate?
No, I haven't. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I haven't seen. I wasn't really into the British stuff. I was more UK, American. And so at this point, I believe, like Jerry's already realizing that the problem you've got with the puppets is the fact that there's no animation in the face. So if you want to make them talk, how do you? If you've got two of them on screen, how do you know who's speaking? So they just sort of jiggle them up and down, and there you go. That's where the talking comes from. But there's a limitation there. So even at this point, they're starting to realize, yeah, this isn't kind of working. They've got to find a way to push up the quality. But for the most part, it does what it needs to do. And I have no idea how successful it was, but once again, it was a step in the direction that we ended up going in.
You've actually hit the nail on the head where Gerry Anderson himself was frustrated that the shows he was doing were coming across as kids shows, like the other puppet shows that were on at the time. And he, right from the start, wanted to differentiate his puppet shows, his marionette shows, with the other things, and try to not make them sort of the preschool kid shows that they were, and try and move on to better things. And we see that as we move through the different shows he made in his career.
Exactly right. So despite the fact that these things are decades ago, like 60-something years ago, and obviously made for kids, believe it or not, as Rusky Babes has said earlier, they still make the toys and the merchandise. And sure enough, Torchy got some stuff as well.
Well, Torchy got more stuff than Twizzle did, and a lot of it was the same kind of thing. There was some particularly interesting things that I had never seen before. In the top corner there on the right, there is actually a Torchy dress-up costume where you could buy a costume and dress your kid up as Torchy and go around and pretend you were Torchy the Battery Boy, which I don't know many of those would still exist. You had the annuals and you had the storybooks. You had the Pelham puppets as well. Also, you can see the little cardboard marionettes, so you could cut them out and make your own puppet if you wanted to, like, get some Torchy action happening. There's a game a lot like Snakes and Ladders. There's activities books, and it must have been, again, a moderate success back then. Merchandising wasn't something that was huge around shows, but obviously it captured the imagination of kids enough to be successful with merchandisers.
It's kind of funny because when you think of kids shows from a long time ago, the first thing that strikes your head is you think of Sesame Street and Muppet Show and all that. And of course, this predates all that, right? So you can imagine if you're a child, and now, to be fair, in these day and age, it's all computer generated. There's a lot of colors and all the rest of it. But seeing puppets on a TV, you can just imagine as a kid, you'd be going, "Oh mate, I'm really dialed into that," because there was no equivalent. That didn't come out for another like 15-something years later. So you can see why it would have worked and why they produced merchandise for it. Because at the moment, you scratch your head going, who would buy a Torchy the Battery Boy, blah, 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 blah. But that's the reason why, because there was nothing else at the time. So if you're watching kids shows and they've got the puppets and all the rest of it, you'd be out there buying the merchandise because that's what you could relate to, as we can see here.
Well, you can see here, Torchy actually has had VHS and DVD releases. And the interesting thing about this, I grew up loving Gerry Anderson, watched a lot of his shows, and a lot of them never got repeated on Australia or weren't even shown here. So Thunderbirds was pretty much it for most people. But people who grew up in Melbourne would remember the infamous Minotaur Books basement that had all the import videos. It wasn't even DVDs at the time, where you could go there. Everywhere else had videos for $29, but Minotaur was special. All their videos were $89 imports, which was a lot of money in the 80s and 90s. Now, even myself, who was a massive Gerry Anderson fan, I remember when the Torchy videos were imported through Minotaur, with the UK editions being in Minotaur Books, and going, nah, I'm not paying $89 for that, because I knew I'd be going home and watching a very crude black and white puppet show on the tenuous link that it's a Gerry Anderson related show. So even I, as a big collector, didn't see it at the time.
There's a fun factoid from Rusky Bose he mentioned earlier. I didn't put it on screen because it had some foul language in it. But Roberta Lee mentioned up there was actually working with Gerry Anderson on both Twizzle and Torchy, I think it was. But they sort of went their separate ways after this because they clearly didn't get along, as we've seen. Now, Davinian has joined us and has mentioned about the fact he's older than us because watched the Gerry Anderson shows when they were first screened in the 60s. I'll tell you what, that is very, very impressive, actually. So, yes, well done to you.
Do you remember any of these black and white ones? I do wonder if they were shown here. I looked briefly and I couldn't find any record beyond some of the more popular ones being shown in Australia. So it is really interesting to have you watching tonight, just to sort of chip in with any of your memories if you want to when we go along, for sure.
Yep, totally agree. Rusky Made's come up with the idea that fans have colorized the Torchy. I can't imagine that'd be a bit of a bastard of a job to do. And you do have to wonder what the return on investment is. But I mean, why not, I guess. And if you can, then why, and get into it. So this one is the next one. So once again, we're sort of moving forward in terms of the technology. Okay, now we've got the idea of saying, okay, we've got marionettes, they do their thing. Okay, we now need to bring them to life. So we need the eyes to move, we need the lips to move. That's where this next step sort of came from. The thing I found interesting with this particular show is it wasn't set in the UK. It was actually set in America. And it's based on an old Wild West. Feather Falls.
This is really interesting, and this is where Gerry Anderson was a bit of a smart guy. He made everything from this point on with a view of selling it to America. So he would get American funding, he would have American actors and characters in the show, and would often have, you know, a mix of English and American voice talent. And that was really smart because a lot of people wouldn't have thought about that. Now, Four Feather Falls was another show that I had never seen. And I have to say, I looked it up on YouTube, thought I'll watch a couple of minutes just to see what it's like, and watch the entire first episode, and found it, like, I wouldn't sit down and watch the whole series, but I found it really fun to watch, and it had a really cool and unique premise, which I'd never seen before, and the puppetry was good enough now to carry it, and you could watch it these days. That's the great thing about puppets, I think. Once you're dialed into it's a puppet show, it doesn't date. And when you're setting it in the Old West, it's already, you know, in the past. So it doesn't really matter at what point forward you see it. It's just a Western for kids made with puppets. Now, the concept of Four Feather Falls, it's going to be one of those tongue twisters.
I know, it's not, it doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? Hey, yeah.
Tex saves the chief's son, and the chief rewards him by giving him 4 feathers, and they're magical feathers. One of them allows his gun to shoot without him touching it. So if he's in danger, the gun can pop out and defend him. The other two of the other feathers allow his horse to talk, and the other one allows his dog to talk. So you've got this fantasy show already. You think of a Western, and there are no Westerns like that with talking horses and talking dogs and, you know, magical guns and Indians giving wishes through feathers and things like that. And I thought about it and go, do you know what? That's pretty genius. It covers fantasy, Western, works in America, works in England. So you can see he was a bit of an entrepreneur when it came to setting up things that would be popular and viewed around the world. And it still holds up today, and the episodes exist.
Indeed, they do. Now, Greg has looked it up and said apparently Twizzle was shown in Australia at least in 1961. If only VCRs existed back then. Sorry, I jumped in a bit earlier. I was showing the characters, and I thought what I like about it is the characters already got a very unique sort of look about them. And if you look at like Tex Tucker on the top left, you think that like puppet could have been manufactured just yesterday. So they're really sort of getting very individualistic, which is particularly groovy.
There was a high standard through a lot of Gerry Anderson's work, and I think as a producer, he had a standard that he wanted stuff to be at, and that has meant that it hasn't aged as badly as it could have. You'll also see, I think he was a genius with names. Now, Tex Tucker isn't a particularly amazing name, but you know, Tex is a cowboy name, and Tex Tucker, you've got that Marvel sort of formula for names where it's all Peter Parker and stuff like that. And you'll see through the Gerry Anderson shows, he does the same thing where the names are often very catchy and very memorable through all of his shows. So there is a cut. He writes and he produces a cut above a lot of the stuff that was being produced at the same time.
Yeah, Tex Tucker was also very American as well. God damn it, Tex Tucker. Absolutely fantastic. We're talking about talking horses. Yeah, got on Mr. Ed as well. So who knows? Somebody who maybe like they looked at the talking horse on the show and go, you know what? Let's do a real version of that. And you just never know where the inspiration for these things come from. But yeah, even though Four Feathered Falls does not roll off the tongue very, very nicely, the merchandise did.
It did. And this was, again, with every one of his shows, it kind of gathered steam, and you could see that the merchandisers on this were particularly impressed by the characters and by the show. This is the first one of his shows that got a cover on the TV Times, which is, I guess, the equivalent of TV Week or something like that. This also had some records released for it, which had the theme and stories on as well. So you have it being released for the first time in a home format, so you can, before the age of really being able to tape stuff or keep it, you actually had the albums. And we'll see through the rest of the series, Gerry Anderson, had his own record label and often released a lot of the stuff on LP or on EP for children to be able to watch at home, which I think is really a genius thing, because you've got to remember, before video, and there wasn't many repeats in the UK because of union rules, TV was very ephemeral. It came and went, and it wasn't till the advent of video in the 80s, when that took off, that a lot of these shows got a resurgence. But by him having a record label that released a lot of these stories and music, it probably had a lot more life than other shows around it that didn't do the same kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly right. And as I put up a few minutes ago, yeah, Rusky Bose is right. Westerns were the go at the time.
Yes.
So, and you are right. If you're going to cash in on an American audience, then that's the way to do it. Make a Western, do it with puppets, and you're the only show of your own type. Yeah. As we can see by some of this merchandise.
So there was the Four Feather Falls board game, and there were jigsaws. Now, if you were a collector and you loved this stuff, I tell you what, this would do your head in, because there are jigsaws, and I could find the box art on the back of the boxes, as in there are 4 jigsaws in this series, and I could not find examples of all of them, as in I don't know if they all exist in somebody's collection out there, but there's not pictures of them online. So there are at least 8 different jigsaws based on this this TV series, and I could find, a couple of them images in people's collections. So these would be very, very hard to find. That blue one there, that was an empty box that sold on eBay for about £100, and there were no pieces in it. And I could not find any other reference on the internet to that set of jigsaws existing. So the the red set, there were people who had some of them in their collection. But, it is one of those things where even Westerns from that time, not being Gerry Anderson, have a bit of collectability about them. So being Gerry Anderson and a Western and a TV show, this is probably the first one where you start seeing the secondary market and the prices on eBay command a bit more than the earlier stuff.
Yeah, it's getting a bit more heading towards the current stuff, that's for sure. And is in like the later material that got produced. And as you mentioned, the show is available on DVD and Blu-ray. Actually, is it on DVD at least? So yeah.
Yeah, so I can say I watched the first episode. Of course, it is very old-fashioned to what you'd watch now, and might seem a little bit hokey, but I thought it stood up really well, and you can definitely see Gerry Anderson's fingerprints all over the series. And it is one of those things, I think if you're a Gerry Anderson fan, you could be quite proud of. This is the heritage of where some of the other shows came from.
And the fact that you are right, it's got his name on the box set up here. Now, of course, he's a famous guy by today's standards, so you can understand why they did that. And it's kind of funny because there would have been people watching this when it first came out thinking, oh, yeah, I don't know, Gerry Anderson means nothing to me. Decades later, he's become a household name. So, but yeah, if you're a bit of a completist and you want to sort of like really get into a bit of Gerry action, and you can at least go and check it out.
One of the things that I noticed on eBay, with all of the things that were Gerry Anderson from this era, if the person had maybe found one at an op shop and whacked it on eBay and said, this is the Twizzle Adventure Annual, it went for nothing. If they put in the title, Gerry Anderson's Twizzle, then it would go for 10 times as much. So it just shows you the popularity of his name, where people are searching for Gerry Anderson rather than the actual older shows.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're a completist, you would go right back, even if it's like a completely foreign territory as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
Speaking of like sort of moving up in the world, so you've gone from the Wild West, and the horses and the donkeys and the dogs and all the rest of it. You go, what can you do that's completely different? Oh no, let's stick some dudes in a car, because we don't like them walking around because they look shit when they're walking around. Stick them in a car, and suddenly we're off and running with a huge success story. And Rusky Babes will be as happy as Larry to see this.
Yeah, his keyboard will be smoking as he types out all the fun facts.
Fun factoids, Rusky Babes, give them to us, son. We need more.
Do you know what, Dags? You said something facetiously, but it's absolutely true. Gerry Anderson absolutely hated how the puppets, marionettes walked. And
Yep.
one of the ways that he got around that was from this series onwards, he invented amazing vehicles and cars and spaceships and always had them sitting behind consoles and doing stuff because one of the things he was embarrassed about was you couldn't make a puppet look like it was walking or especially running naturally. And even in Thunderbirds, there are some where they try to make them run and you're just like, that don't look so great.
Yeah, I believe it's Fireball XL5 where no one walks anywhere. They're either sitting or they're standing, but they're never moving. And if you see them moving, you never see their legs. It's always whatever. So yeah, exactly right. But good old Supercar sort of comes into the scheme of things, and suddenly we have got a lot of characters to play with.
Yes. So you've got, again, Mike Mercury, which is another one of those great names. This is what I was sort of talking about, where the lead characters in a lot of these series had that sort of Marvel name. Super Thunder Sing Car is go. These are the main characters, though. You've got Mike Mercury, Jimmy Gibson, Professor Popkiss, who was sort of a doddery old professor, a bit like Q, I guess, from the James Bond. Mitch the Monkey. Supercar, beautiful, graceful, yes. Then you've got some of the, I guess, the villain down the center there is Master Spy, and I guess he looks a bit like Green Street from some of those old, almost
I was thinking it was like a Blofeld gone wrong, but of course this is before that.
Yeah, it is. It's more like Sydney Green Street from sort of Casablanca kind of villain.
Yeah,
but he's a Russian villain, and his henchman Zarin is his sort of bumbling henchman as well. So there's a good mix of characters, and what they did here I found very interesting. They wanted the show to appeal more than just to kids. So what they did, they'd have an A and a B story, and the A story would be the action story in Supercar, and then the B story would be the more sort of brainy story with the professor doing something smart. Because Gerry Anderson had decided that kids were watching, but if you wanted a show that the whole family watched, you could have a bit of a smarter show that kids could enjoy, but mum and dad could sit down and not be bored out of their brain as well. Again, a marketing genius thing to do, because although that's a given now, back in the day, that was kind of groundbreaking.
Talking about Sydney Green Street, Kevin said Maltese Falcon.
Yes,
Yeah, right. He
right.
was in that, but he was in Casablanca. He was in Casablanca too. His name was Ferrari. He actually owned the rival bar.
Yes.
There you go. Oh, nerd. So obviously Supercar comes out by this point. Jerry is starting to get a bit of a name for himself. So there they go. Out come, not only we got the fun factoids, we've also got the merchandise that goes with it. And there's a lot as well.
So Supercar, I guess you would say, was the first one where it was really merchandised and pushed and very, very popular with kids. It used back projection, and it also was the first one to use fish tanks and aquariums in front of the models to make it look like it was underwater. Supercar, of course, I would not call a car. It's more of a rocket ship.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of cockeyed, isn't it? Take the wheels off it. The idea of car, because car refers to carriage. Yes. That's where the name came from. If there's no wheels, it's actually a rocket ship. But
it's a fantastic design. It's one of those futuristic designs that when we look at the past, we see how the past imagined the future but never came to be. So I think the design for Supercar is fantastic. But it's not a car, but it's a car that can fly, can go to space, can drive underwater, and of course probably drive on a road too. But I think it's one of those shows that really captured the imaginations of kids at the time, and they really started to merchandise it. Now, this is the first one of the shows that had comic books, and you've seen there's a release pattern with a lot of the shows we've looked at where they have the same kind of merchandise releases for different shows that are popular. And Supercar definitely is the first one that matches that template, where they've sold the license in America for comics, sold it in England for different comics, books, annuals, jigsaws, records. We're going to have a look at all of it. Now, I love the comics from this era. I think the artwork is absolutely fantastic. And because you've got Supercar released in Golden Key comics, but also in TV comics from the UK, you've got that two distinct styles of artwork from both sides of the Atlantic, but both of them are really fantastic. Golden Key comics always had these amazing painted covers, a bit different from the Marvel and DC, which were more comic book covers. And the British comics were more like a newspaper where you'd have like 2 pages of a comic every week rather than the whole comic dedicated to the one show. Interestingly enough, Supercar must have been popular because it got the color pages, and you often found the popular shows would be on the on the cover, and the middle spread, which was color. And if it wasn't so popular, you were sort of relegated to the black and white pages. So Supercar was popular enough to have the color pages, at least for a while, in TV comic.
And of course, in the 50s and the 60s, the space race was starting to find its legs, and there's a whole lot of think about looking up on the sky and the moon and all the rest of it. And obviously, a lot of young people would have been thinking, "Oh, sure, we've never really thought about it before. What's out there and that sort of business, science fictions, and all this sort of shit." And of course, one of the things that would have really sold it, of course, with Supercar, is not just the design of the car, but of course all the imagery that goes with it, and of course the annuals. I mean, you can't get more spacey than this. It looks fantastic.
No, the annuals are fantastic, and I do have some customers that collect these kind of annuals, not supercar ones, but any of the annuals from this era that have like the futuristic metropolis looking, what I was saying, artwork from the past that predicted a very futuristic future, and one that we didn't really get. But the designs and the concepts that the artist put out based on the episodes of the TV show are absolutely fantastic. I mean, the annuals were a traditional English thing, different from comic annuals. The British hardback annuals were sort of the traditional Christmas gift, and every show kind of got one. So if you had a favorite show, one of those traditional gifts that you got under the tree each year was the annual of that show. Now, you could not have been disappointed if you opened your wrapping and you had that annual, because they look fantastic. And if you judge a book by the cover, you know that there's adventures aplenty inside those books.
No, I totally agree with you, actually. And it does, even by today's standards, looks very, very groovy and exciting. And as a kid, you'd be like, "Oh my God, mate, this is the greatest thing ever." And of course, there's a lot more that came with it as well.
Well, as I was saying, Supercar came from that era where they started really putting a lot of it onto records so kids could listen to the stories or listen to the music from it at home. Now, TV 21, Century 21 albums came along a bit later, so we haven't actually got to the point where they were releasing it on their own label. But you can see Supercar got a couple of contemporary releases. You can see the first two pictures there were released in the early 60s. They had fantastic covers. They are pretty rare. They're very collectible, and a lot of people try to get them. And then you zoom right forward to the middle there, and you can see with current vinyl releases, Supercar got a double yellow vinyl album that was available recently. And in between that, underneath, you can see there was a couple of CD releases of themes and music from Supercar. And then the TV Century 21 albums. There's a mini album there that has different popular themes from all the different Gerry Anderson shows and Doctor Who for some reason. And we've got a LP down the bottom as well that's the same thing. It's like themes and dialogue from the TV 21 albums. Now, all of that is pretty collectible. I think it's one of those things where some people collect everything and some people just collect certain things. But because there are a lot of people that collect vinyl, these are quite hard to find. Now, I have had the TV 21 themes. I think I've still got that, but none of those other ones I've ever seen in Australia. They are pretty hard to find.
Very good stuff. And if you like a bit of a jiggler or a dangler, you'd have to go for some of these as well.
So the Pelham puppets again were released for Supercar. We have most of the main characters there. And the good thing about the puppets is they weren't the really super cheap ones that don't bear any resemblance to the characters. You can see that they were quite good likenesses, I guess, because they're based on something that's already a puppet. The puppetry aspect of it already works. So you can see these puppets when they came home. Kids would have absolutely loved them. It would be like having the star of the show in your home. And I can just imagine kids gathered around like the old TV set watching Supercar and having the puppets with them. It would have been quite a thrilling thing and quite a nostalgic thing for anyone who had them growing up.
You do wonder, people who are, I don't know what you call them, puppet people who do marionation type things today or in the past 50 years, said if they were those who said, oh, they got inspired to get into that career purely from these shows. I mean, before Thunderbirds, we're talking about the early stuff like Supercar and and all the rest of it. So you do wonder if that was the inspiration. So if that's the case, you could say Gerry sort of inspired the entire industry of people to take on this skill set because they were inspired by the shows that they were watching, and this is one of them. So
interestingly enough, Russell is stealing some of my show because I was going to bring up that it was Sylvia Tham was on this show doing the voices, and she later became Sylvia Anderson. Now, the interesting fact, there were many different female characters on this show, and she voiced every single one of them. So every time you heard a female voice on this show, it was hers. This is interesting as well, that this was the first show, and it was towards the end of the series that they started saying it was filmed in supermarionation. Do you know what supermarionation actually is, or why they used supermarionation as a...
so supermarionation, as I understand it, one is the being able to animate the facial movements, the eyes and the mouth, but also to hide the strings as well. And the idea of hiding the string, that's how I understood it. So the idea, because normal marionation, you can see all the wires, right? Yep. And I know that with the shows, they started using thinner wires. And as we discovered with Thunderbirds, they started painting the wires out to match the background. And of course, it worked. As far as you knew, the thing will stand there by itself, which is absolutely, so it's not just marionation. It's super because you're going the extra step to make it look like a real thing. That's how I would interpret it.
It's, you're pretty much right. There's a couple of extra steps. And again, it's to do with Gerry Anderson being a quite a good profiteer, and it was so that they could differentiate it from every other show that was using puppets, even though some of them used the same kind of technology, and that they could patent and copyright the term, so they had a unique term for it as well. And he wanted to distance this show particular and everything moving forward from the kids shows puppetry. And even if they used the same thing, it was based on a puppetry technique from Czechoslovakia, I think that was when I was reading up on it. Every show from now on, you're right, they hid the wires more, they put more electronics in the mouth, in the face and in the head, and hid as much as they could, so the process got better and better. But they wanted to have a term, supermarionation, so it just sounded better than everybody else.
Yeah. That's how I sort of looked, because it's a technique, really, because in the end, the puppet's still a puppet, regardless of whether it's Mr. Squiggle or something from one of these shows. The principle is identical no matter what. It's what you do with it. But you are right. Yeah, you give it that really, really funky name. It's not just marionation or marionettes. It's super marionettes. Like, oh, it's got to be something really, really special. And, of course, it was. And, of course, the other cool thing that didn't require any wires hanging up to keep your characters hanging up was, of course, it really was the early version of Kit, if you will. It's like, mate, sell the damn car. That's where it's like your Batmobile of the 60s. This is where all the money's going to be made. So, yay, team.
It is interesting. Supercar is probably the first of the merchandise Gerry Anderson vehicles. And I tell you what, he must have seen the cash registers ringing on this and gone, from now on, we're having amazing vehicles that can be turned into toys in every single show we do.
Well, that actually makes a lot of sense, because you are right. You can learn lessons just from this. You go, oh my God, it's not the characters itself; it's the hardware, the vehicles, and of course, what happens in Thunderbirds is freaking shitloads of the damn things. So, and because they've been sold everywhere, even in your store's got some. So, this is a step into what was to become. But yes, if you're going to sell a bit of hardware, this is going to be the absolute money spinner, as you said.
Yes, and you can see that with the supercar, that they mainly use the same color scheme. Again, there are a couple of color photos of Supercar where the earlier shows, there's not very much color photographs at all. I do find it interesting. Probably my favorite box art is that bottom one there, which is Japanese, where they've added green and a couple of different colors to it, which I think makes it even more cooler. But of course, you've got the dinky toy corgi size collectible cars. You've got the plastic ones and the die-cast ones. And it must have been a big hit. It would have been quite interesting to see the toy shops back in the day where you've got, like, you know, police cars and all these other normal things. And then you've got Supercar. It must have been a real standout toy at the time, because there wasn't a lot of science fiction stuff being produced back then.
Yeah, exactly right. And of course, now it's a common thing. You produce a car and a show, you make like lots of toys of it. But back then, it would have been a pretty rare thing, I can think. And the only cars that would have existed are actual real cars at the time. So to have something, even though we're calling it supercar, but as we said, it's got no wheels. So you stick it on the carpet and go, well, you can't roll it anywhere. Can't roll it anywhere. Having said that, though, they did. They produced
They produced a lot of stuff for Supercar. You can see in the previous slide we had sort of the die casts and pre-made ones, but model kits and snap together kits, and ones that did different things. There was ones that you could put different discs in, so when you let it go, they would go in a different route around the floor when you release them. There were versions that came with the figures and little mini dioramas. There was one there in the top corner that has the supercar garage with the figures that you could display around it. So even though you never see much merchandise from this in Australia, it was quite a popular show. I was actually surprised by how much supercar memorabilia there was. And I wonder how much of this Russell has. Yeah. And a lot of the shows, Russell's right, they were in negotiations to do second and third seasons of shows, and they'd mention a new one that they had ready to go, and they'd go with the next one, which was disappointing in some ways because some of the shows could have gone for longer, but probably it was good in other ways because none of them outstayed their welcome, and then they moved on to probably better and more interesting concepts. Supercar did the same thing as Four Feather Falls, where they set it in America and had American characters, even though it was filmed in England. It was a American production. Supercar was the first one that was ordered. Would you know Lou Grade? He was one of the great.
Yep.
Yeah. So he had a big collaboration with Gerry Anderson from this series for about 20 years, where Gerry Anderson would take him ideas and he would greenlight them, and then they would make them. And because they were very marketed towards the US, it was obviously very beneficial that they could split production costs and things that the BBC didn't really do, but independent television did. So it was kind of interesting that this is a different way to market and make shows in the UK at the time.
What I find funny, right, is like if you're going to do you're producing in England, but you're selling it in America, and it's about a car, right? So it's kind of funny because the car is the things like Kit from Knight Rider. And you go, okay, well, if it's an English show, but it's an American market, do you make the car left-hand drive or right-hand drive? And the solution to that is easy. You just stick it in the damn center.
You make it a supercar and it doesn't matter one way or the other. This is one of the ones I've had in the shop once. This is a modern version of Supercar from probably about 10, 15 years ago by Product Enterprise. It is one of the nicest Supercar toys. So it comes on a stand, and of course you can take it off the stand. It really does look like a miniature version of something that's just flown off the TV screen. You can see there's a limited edition silver version there as well, but why would you want that? You just want the one that's in color. Yeah. So Supercar is known enough and endearing enough that they still produce merchandise for it today.
And that's the key thing as well, which is particularly groovy, because it's not the kind of thing that a lot of people would necessarily know. They go, oh, yeah, we know Thunderbirds, and they might know Captain Scarlet and all the rest of it. But some of the other shows, they go, oh, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. So it's a very more of an eclectic taste, which is a good thing because there's a fair bit to grab.
Yep. So, again, it was really aimed at all age groups. Again, you've got the Supercar snap down the bottom, the cards, and I think they probably, every one of the series up to them, the same company made a series of snap cards for them. And when I looked into it, just about every kid's show they did, because obviously printing up cards is super cheap and you can get it out really quick. So it was one of those staples as well that probably we don't see as much today, or it's changed across to gum cards and movie cards and collecting cards rather than snap cards. But it's interesting to see that they were a big thing back at the time. There's a couple of different games there. There's the Supercar Target game, which is very cool. It's basically hit the ball on the right targets and get it to stop there. But again, the artwork is what makes it cool. And then you've got the Supercar to the Rescue game, and you can see the just from the games and how the show was, the very origins of Thunderbirds were starting here, right to the point where Supercar does that sort of countdown and goes up for vertical thrust and stuff like that. Probably if they can do the same thing every episode, it makes it a little bit cheaper as well. But you can see how the bones for starting International Rescue were beginning with Supercar.
Yep, no, totally agree.
And again, Supercar had a series of jigsaws. And again, like the last lot of jigsaws, they must be quite hard to find because although there's a couple to the set, there's not a lot of resources online that show them. You can go to even some of the big sort of Gerry Anderson collector websites, and probably from Fireball XL5 onwards, they have very, very good resources of everything that's ever been made. But going back, especially the first couple of shows, it's a very patchy archive of what they've actually got to what they know exists. And I guess this is the same for a lot of things that were kids shows that were quite ephemeral, where kids lose a couple of pieces of jigsaw and the jigsaw just gets thrown out. And when you're talking about a jigsaw from 60 years ago now, there's not a lot of them that have made it in good condition. So jigsaws are always cool because they have amazing art. They're usually unique art that have been painted for the show. And they're usually very collectible with collectors because they love the art. And then they're damn hard to get because you always want to complete one. Kids have always eaten one or stuck one up their nose, or a mum's like vacuumed it up, and then, you know, you haven't got a complete jigsaw anymore.
You missed the last one. The dog ate it. So what's funny is, like, with all the merchandise that you see, okay, a lot of it's all been like the books, as we've seen, the puzzles and all that. So obviously someone had to design it, someone had to manufacture it. And of course, that comes as just normal part of the process. I said, well, okay, we've sold jigsaw puzzles before for other shows. We'll make new puzzles for new shows, right? But what happens when you get products that are made that are really left field, really out of the box thinking? You go, oh, I didn't see one of those coming. Someone had to design it, market it, manufacture it, and then sell it, because I thought there's definitely somebody out there is going to want this. And of course, when you start thinking about supercar, you go, what else would you make besides the die-cast version of the car and all the rest of it? You have to think a little bit left of center, and of course you end up with stuff like this, money boxes and things.
So yeah, this is a really interesting slide because it was they don't really fit with everything else slides. So we'll just put it on here. You've got the first example of Gerry Anderson lunchbox with the supercar lunchbox at the top there. You've got the front and the back. So if you're a supercar fan, you could impress your friends at school with your supercar lunchbox. But then it gets a bit weirder. You've got the supercar clock money box, which, you know, how fantastic is that? It's a clock and it keeps your money, which is one of those unique
but doesn't tell the time.
I don't know if I've seen a clock money box before, but it is one of...
You're supposed to say, what time is it on the clock? Oh, it's time to go watch some more supercar.
It's time to cash out my money.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen a clock money box before. So obviously someone had the idea, like you said, what can we make? Let's make a money box. Let's make a clock. Let's combine them and make them both.
I just realized my fun factoid has just covered up the thing at the bottom, which I really actually wanted to look at. So the key thing is, okay, everybody's read that. If you haven't, just press pause on the replay. The intercom set at the bottom. How good's that?
I know. And it really is one of those things where you see with supercar, the merchandise is not stuff that could be put out instantly and then disappear for the next year. Usually, as you would know, some toys can be pushed out quick, like the card games and jigsaws, but some toys have to be made in a factory and have the dies made and production and all of that. And when you get to that level, it means that the manufacturers have to have faith that that series is going to be popular for a couple of years, because that might be how long it takes to get the product to the shelves and in the toy shops and seeing some return on it. So when you start getting the intercom set, and you start getting the play at home movie sets and the viewer sets and the Viewmaster sets, you know that they're onto a bigger winner than they've ever been onto before. I think all of this has amazing, 60s artwork. It's got that sort of charming artwork from the era that I really love to collect, but you don't see much of it around.
And the cool thing is, from Gerry Anderson's perspective, he will be saying, oh, these people are buying licenses to manufacture this stuff. Therefore, there's a market for it. Therefore, the show must be popular.
Yeah.
So it can only go up from here. So the last thing you want is to produce a program and everybody, all the toy manufacturers go, no, we don't want a piece of it because we know it's just going to tank. So if people are actually saying, yes, we want to build these things, oh, we don't need to do the puzzles, we will do the intercoms and the projectors and whatever, that's a good sign that you're on a winning formula. And of course, we all know where it all ended up from there, so which is particularly grubby.
Well, the thing is, in the UK, and this ties into these as well, they had very, very strict union rules right up to the 80s where you could not repeat stuff, or if you did repeat it, all the artists, as in the actors and different people involved, got repaid their original fee, because they did not want repeats putting actors out of work. So if you didn't show it, I think there was an 18-month window you could repeat it. And then once it was out of that 18 months, you could not show it without repaying everyone. So it was very little repeats at the time. So manufacturers had to have faith that the show was going to be popular, come back for another series, or be memorable enough that kids would want it maybe when the show wasn't on anymore. Now, Supercar is one of those shows that, again, I don't remember in Australia. I do remember seeing some of the videos, maybe at a science fiction convention way back, and kind of watching it and be interested because it's related to Thunderbirds, but thinking it was a little bit quaint. But it obviously was popular enough to sell quite well because there was multiple video releases and DVD releases of the entire series. So it is one of the more remembered shows if they've enough nostalgia for people to buy the whole thing on video and then buy the whole thing again on DVD and then buy the one with special extras and stuff like that.
Which leads directly into this.
And this is the latest super duper box set of all your supercar needs. It's the one that, you know, comes in the massive box, and it's got replicas of the annuals and books and comic books from the time. It's got books on the making of it. It's got the full series on Blu-ray. I'd be interested to see, you know, how it looks on Blu-ray. If they've got the original film elements, it might look quite sharp and quite good. So,
but as we discovered with Thunderbirds, like when they put it on DVD, the quality was so good, you suddenly saw the strings. So it actually ruined it. You actually needed to stick it on, leave it on video, and leave the Super Mario Nation actually have it still that work, rather than saying, "Oh, there's all these strings. How come we didn't see them before?" So if they digitally changed it and said, "Okay, we're now going to digitally remove the strings," so because they're really, really obvious, then it wouldn't be so bad, I would think. But still, a 60s show that wasn't designed for this sort of really high definition formula, I don't know. It could be a bit iffy. You might see all the flaws.
It is one of those things. I think I'm a little more forgiving on puppet shows because you do know that they're puppets and there are strings there. If you don't see them, it's a bonus. If you
but
do
they went
see
to such,
them,
but they went to such great lengths to try and get rid of them. You don't want to put them back. That's actually like making your product worse. So, yeah. But still, I mean, it's good that they've done it. The fact that they released it in the Blu-ray version does show that there's a market for it, and that's actually, I guess, the point of the discussion. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And Williams writes, from Network, and Network are usually a sign of really good restoration and really good box sets. I'm sure he has most of them in his collection.
Indeed, indeed you do, Diddy. And with that in mind, that actually brings us to the end of the discussion this evening.
So it's gone a little bit short. We were toying with the idea of doing XL5 tonight, but that has so much merchandise we would have run over and it would have been rushed the whole thing through, so we haven't done it. But you can see we're going to do multiple parts on Gerry Anderson over the next couple of months, and there's a lot of good shows still to come, and we haven't even got into his live action stuff, and that's, I think, the next couple of episodes, it'll be where people start remembering and start being able to relate to their own childhood with some of the different shows that he's done.
Exactly right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for this evening, and I guess we haven't done this yet. Well, I suppose we should. We should be doing. Well, make sure you keep all your collectibles mint in keep them all just mint in box, Mr. Tracy.
Cut the strings.
There. So there you go.
Yes. All right.
You're not going to say anything,
or cut the strings.
Yes, Mr. Tracy. All right, see you guys. Party hard.
Have
Next
a good
time.
night,
We'll see you next
guys.
week. Okay,
See you.
bye-bye. Bye.